Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Wynonna Earp. So in this episode, Wynonna went after a particular remnant known as, I don't even remember his name, but essentially he was killing people basically for not being forgiven. Essentially kind of like paying for your sins that you commit and not being forgiven for them. Because from what it seemed like, I don't know for sure if that's what they said he was profession-wise. He was like a barber. Basically, people come in his chair and, they'd spill his secrets to him. And the interesting thing is Wyatt didn't directly kill this guy. What happened is essentially Wyatt wanted him to be a witness, kind of get put on the stand as a witness. And when Wyatt told him to be on a witness stand, he signs death certificate, basically meaning people who didn't want him to testify, eventually, hired someone to kill him. So by adjacently, Wyatt killed him. So apparently remnants weren't even made just, by being directly killed by Wyatt, but, indirectly as well. It turns out one of the people, at least it seems he brought it up, that Doc brought it up that he was the one that chained the guy down. Because that was the very interesting thing, is the reason why he bounces between mirrors, which I thought was a pretty interesting way, because none of the other remnants have powers like he was kind of the only one. And the reason being is because his actual physical body was in a river. That's how he was able to kind of channel the power of reflections, because it was connected to how he died. So that's kind of how he was drawing his power. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. Obviously, Wynonna, finally believes that, Henry is Doc. I love how he was doing all those different shots to kind of show off. The entire time I was like, you fucking show off. Having the nerve to use the gun upside down, going behind his back, tilting his hat over to cover his eyes. Because she's like, Wynonna didn't believe him, so he had to prove it. And the best way to do that was with the shooting. And I love the fact is, I don't know how Dawes did it, but Dawes ended up figuring it out, because Waverly and Wynonna were keeping that from him. Because, Dawes arrested Henry because he was in a room with one of the victims who died by, this revenant. The moment he pulled out his knife, I was like, somebody's going to walk in the bathroom and you're going to be busted for it. And it's like, obviously, it'd be Waverly. And she's like, Waverly, now I can explain this. And I love the fact is that, like, Waverly's super pissed at him. You got to understand the fact is the reason why he did and said what he said to her that kind of upset her. It's because he wanted you to get away from that situation. Obviously, Doc's got a lot of stuff hidden away, but he does, in some way, care about them, because they are the descendants of his best friend, a man he considered like a brother, Wyatt. Which we got a little bit of a preview of, like, that relationship, because of, apparently, one of the last times Doc saw Wyatt, basically Doc was sick and Wyatt was coming to Purgatory back in the day, basically hunting someone, but he's basically, come on Doc, let's go for one more ride, but Doc decided to stay back. And it kind of explained in this episode, because Doc explained the reason why he is what he is. He's not a revenant. He's not a ghost. He made a deal with someone to basically give him immortality. And not the kind of, I'm indestructible immortality, I don't age. I can die from anything else, but I don't, in his words, time doesn't affect him anymore. But he can still die from a knife and a gunshot wound or being hit by a train, so. And that's kind of what led to a fallout between him and Wyatt, because Wyatt, because this was around the time Wyatt found out about demons existing, because he never really given too much thought to the supernatural. He just believed the only evil in this world are evil men. There are no such thing as demon. There's only men who do the good they do or the bad they do. It's as simple as that. But then he ended up finding out, there are demons around here who want to end my line, end my family. And ended up seeing that what Wyatt did, that Wyatt essentially made a deal with the devil to cure himself, because he's like, I'm better than ever. It's like, let's go for that ride. Let's go hunt these bad people down. But Wyatt was basically saying, like, the betrayal he's getting from Doc hits him more than just those demons wanting to kill his family, kill his family line. So that's the last time we saw him, because my memory might be wrong on this, but earlier, past episodes, didn't Doc bring up the fact is he was reluctant to be around Earps because apparently he did something bad to Wyatt? We don't see that in this episode, obviously, but it's like, because essentially he talks about the fact is that what he's out for is revenge, and it's like, a revenge against who? The Stone Witch? Is that why he wants to find the Stone Witch? Because she's connected to his situation, and she's the one who made him what he is. And it's like, because as he said, he can die, so it's like, really, like, if it was like, oh, to be normal again, it's like, well, if that was the case, he could off himself at any time, it'd be no problem. But it's like, he's out for specifically revenge, so to me, I can only assume it's connected to Wyatt. Whatever happened with Wyatt, whatever went down between them, the Stone Witch is connected in some shape or form. I also liked in this episode how Dawes and Winona kind of came face to face with Bobo. You know, Winona wanted to kind of put him down, but it's like, no, you can't, because we're literally outgunned. It's like, you can kill him, yeah, sure, and you probably could in this moment, but it'd literally be pointless, because at that moment, his men would come and kill, like, his men surrounding us would kill you. So, and basically, it's kind of interesting, squaring off with the main bad guy. It's very interesting, because she was, you know, there looking for that other remnant, that particular remnant. It's very interesting that he was so willing to let her, you know, prowse around his little camp like that. It's like, that's, the Arabs are your sworn enemy, and it's just like, you're going to let her kind of peruse around. Obviously, she didn't find what she wanted to, because obviously the guy they were looking for wasn't the remnant they were looking for. They ended up finding that guy with his legs cut off. And Winona being her, I love that about her, is the fact that there's no tact. She's not tactful at all. She was just like, oh my God, ill gross, cover up Stumpy. It's like, wow. We see a little bit more of kind of the supernatural element to this universe, where we had Dawes kind of preparing a magical spell, essentially kind of tapping into the dark arts, because even Doc was like, I'm surprised, Dawes, I didn't take you as a kind of voodoo type, kind of meddle with this voodoo stuff. Essentially, it was their way of drawing the Revenant into, turning him into flesh and blood, because they couldn't kill him, you know, because Winona tried to shoot him through the mirrors, but obviously that didn't work, so they had to draw him out in reality, which is very interesting, because it's like, because he kind of brings it up in this episode, Dawes has had experience dealing with demons outside of Purgatory, which it seems like, you know, demons are a widespread thing. It's not just confined to Purgatory. So it does make you wonder, are there other families like the Arabs dealing with demons, or is it just the Arabs bloodline dealing with demons? Because it kind of got brought up in this episode, because Winona's curious, like, she asked Doc, like, does he have any idea why this whole Wyatt curse thing exists, you know, that the Arabs are, you know, are cursed to fight the remnant and put them down and send them to hell. He says no, he didn't really know anything, because Wyatt never really said anything, but it's like, he probably knows a lot more than he's letting on. Because like I said, it seems like he did something to Wyatt, and he doesn't want, you know, Winona or Waverly to know. Because he's like, if they found out what he did to their, you know, ancestors, like, it'd probably end badly for him. So it's like, what did he do? Obviously, I get the feeling he ended up betraying Wyatt. I feel like it was probably one of the costs of getting what he got, you know, his immortality. I mean, at least, like I said, age-wise. So that was probably one of the costs, and that's what he's looking for in this revenge is, like I said, I think the Stone Witch is connected to that, but I mean, that might just be me reading too much into that. I mean, that's my theory. She's connected to somehow whatever happened to Wyatt into his Doc's immortality. I did really like in this episode how Winona essentially, you know, because that guy goes after you if you have to apologize for something. If you're kind of committed to sin, you have to be forgiven for it. And, you know, Winona was kind of going around apologizing. I love how Waverly put it. It's like, literally everyone in town hates you. She's like, yeah, I know. Essentially, she went to an ex-boyfriend of hers back from way, way back in the day. And she was like, yeah, on your 19th birthday, I told you I left. He's like, yeah, you said you had major cramps. She's like, no, I left to be with your brother. And his brother's there playing pool with him. He takes a pool stick and just starts beating on his brother. And his brother runs away and he chases after him. It's like, wow. Winona really knew how to stir up trouble back in the day. You even find out that one of the ladies that got killed in this episode, her husband, who was one of the victims, he was her parole officer, and basically he was selling drugs on the side, very lucrative business, I guess, and he would use some of his parolees as mules to help him out, and Winona was one of them, and essentially he ended up finding out that that lady snitched on Winona. She anonymously turned Winona in as a means of protecting her husband, and that led to Winona getting what was like her third strike. I think it was like her third strike. So it's one of the reasons why she went back to juvie back in the day. And then you also find out that the first victim, her name was Megan. She ended up killing this girl, the girl she was arguing with at the beginning of the episode, because she finally came to that person and told her the truth that she was the one that killed her dad in a car accident and kind of ran away from the scene. Like this entire time, they never knew who did it, but it was her. The reason why she was running away is because Winona was picked on by that girl Megan because she treated her like crap, because Winona's kind of the crazy girl, killed her own dad, just did stuff to kind of make her life miserable and kind of hellish. So Winona paid her back by, sleeping with her boyfriend. And that led to her kind of being all heartbroken and teary-eyed. She drove, but she didn't really know how to drive. That's why the accident got caused. And Dawes kind of did a nice thing. He tried to console her. He'd be like, you were only 16 at the time. So, and she was like, that's kind of the most un-Dawes things you've ever said. But a really interesting, one of the standout moments in this episode is finding out how Waverly, she doesn't bring it up that much, still holds something inside of her, kind of a little bit of resentment towards Waverly. I mean, Waverly holds that towards, a little resentment towards Winona for the fact that Winona's the heir. Waverly's basically explained that she spent so much of her life preparing to be an heir that she was going to be the one to end the heir curse, that she went to school, she studied all this stuff about Wyatt, about all the people, the remnants, and then the person who ran away from it all, Winona, the one who just left everything behind, is, the heir. Is kind of a little unfair. And it's kind of like, well, it's not like Winona chose this, but I think to Waverly, that's what makes it worse. She didn't care at all about this stuff. She left it all behind, yet she ended up being the heir and not her, even though she's dedicated so much of her life to studying it and understanding it. Because he had the blade to Winona's neck, and it's like, Winona's like, okay, it was you, the person I have, that needs to forgive me. And she brought up different things. She's like, you blame me for Daddy's being dead. The Revenant kind of laughs. It's like, okay, Willa dying. It's like, no, me leaving behind. It's like, none of that, is what she holds against her, because she's at this point probably forgiven her for everything. But the one thing she still holds, like, kind of, like I said, holds a grudge against her for is being the heir. Granted, it sounds a little petty, but it's just like, to her, she's like, now Winona's the special one. But then Winona's like, well, you're kind of good in every other regard, so it's like, you don't need this one thing to make you special, because you're already special. But a very interesting episode. I can't wait to find out more about Doc. And it does seem like a little bit more as these episodes progress. We also get to see a little bit more of Dawes, because we had moments where he laughed in this episode, and Winona was like, okay, I've never been more scared in my life. And you actually seen him, like, when he came up with the plan of doing that whole spill thing, he was like, yes, like, kind of like, I'm such a genius for coming up with this, remembering that this was the thing. It's like, you never see that side of Dawes. He's always so stoic. He kind of lets it slip every once in a while, kind of like a smile, and then it quickly fades away. So I can't wait to see more, different sides of Dawes and learn a little bit more about him. But that's really all I want to talk about this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.